What's up, guys? So this video is going to be on the proposed rent and or mortgage and rent cancellation act of 2020. Now, obviously, I'm going to have a little bit of a bias with this being a landlord, and anytime I talk about politics here, I'm going to try to give both sides and see both perspectives, and then ultimately, hopefully, we make a logical stance on it, in a sense. Or hey, you can still disagree, but maybe you learn something and drop a comment. I'll learn something. I don't want to make this. I feel like a lot of the stuff that's coming out now. I talked to my friend about it. He kind of calmed me down. He's like, "Yo, if you're gonna make a video about this, talk about it calmly. Like, the last thing we need is for us to feel the fire of like, oh, you're left and you're right, or you're red, I'm blue, or what. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, we should try to be mature about this and act like adults and try to not just get through this COVID-19, but just get through life. Like we have to come back to being able to understand each other and work out our differences like adults and not like kids. Just because I don't like what you say or you don't like what I say, that means we have to hate each other. I don't think that's the way that we should go about doing things. Now, that being a disclaimer, let's get into this. So basically, if you own a home, I guess this is going to be great for you. So essentially, this is Miss Omar out of Minnesota, a younger congresswoman, and she's proposing this. And I think her heart's like it's in the right place. I don't think like anyone tries to do things like diabolic or evil. I just think that we're going to disagree on the fundamentals, and we're going to disagree on what we think ethically and morally is right or wrong. So if you own a house, basically, or if you're renting, they want to stop payments. So in a sense, that might be good for you, depending on the position you're in. This might be a huge relief for you because you probably don't have money coming in right now, or you're laid off, or whatever it is. And this will help you, not sink and lose your home and everything. So in that aspect of it, and you're renting, you shouldn't be kicked out because of something you can't control. And I get that part, and I feel for that. I think there's a different way to do this other than proposing this exact bill. At this point, I think even printing cash would be easier because you get the economic cycle going than it would be to just stop everything and then propose the back end of this, which is what I don't like, right? So everything comes at a cost. And in this case, politically, is going to come at a cost for landlords because what they want to do in this act, if it passes, we all know, you propose a law, it gets voted on, then it gets enacted, right? And it depends on how fast it moves. There's a lot of debate. Sometimes it doesn't, but let's just say hypothetically it would pass. Basically, they want to set everything up through HUD and agencies like that. And if you owned a property and you stop loan payments, and if you were renting or you own a home and you stop rent payments, they'll stop it. It won't affect your credit score if you're a homeowner, and then you'd pick up at a later date whenever the relief is in place. Then if you're a tenant, you would stop paying interest. You stop paying your payment, and me as a landlord, I would have to apply through the Secretary of State, and I would have to get reimbursed through them and through their program if I wanted to get paid. Now, I read through about 18 pages of the 26 pages. I didn't finish, and I got to a certain point that I just thought that it was ridiculous, and I stopped. And I don't think that those provisions should be added in. That's why I was like, I just got to make this and talk about it. So essentially, going forward, they would set up a separate fund, the government would, to essentially buy our properties, our landlords' properties, and the tenants would continue on, kind of like an expansion, I guess you could say, in a sense, of the Section 8 program. If you're not familiar with Section 8, it's depending on your income and what you make. The government would give you like a coupon right now to go rent, and me as a landlord, if I wanted to rent to you, I'd have to get it, the unit approved. And this is in the state of California. The unit approved for rental, and then I can move you in, and the government would pay me directly, and you would they would pay a certain percentage of the rent, like depending on your income, like 90 to 100, sometimes 100, sometimes 90, sometimes 70, and then I would collect the rest from you. So what they want to do is they said, okay, well, if you own a rental property and you're renting to somebody, you're not collecting, you could set up, apply, and the government will pay you. But it comes with these restrictions. And some of those restrictions are like, you have to have the rents in place for a certain amount of time, for like 5 years. You can't evict somebody. You can't re-rent to somebody unless it's that fixed price. If you ever wanted to sell your property, the person that's buying the property has to go through an approval process through the state in order to purchase the property. and and then every year your mortgage and your interest and your profits have to be reported directly to a government agency, and it has to be reviewed and livable condition by the agency, and you have to make it public notice that you're renting out to somebody. So like your property is no longer your property. You can't just do what you want with it, rent it to whoever you want. You have to go by their guidelines. And they're also setting up a separate fund where if you want to sell your property, and they're afraid of the phrasing in it was like a 2008 crisis where everyone wants to jump out of rentals because it no longer will be profitable, uh, that the government would buy them, and they would only be able to sell them to nonprofits such as co-ops or local government agencies, or if you started a nonprofit, and essentially you would still make a profit, but just enough to maintain a salary and to fix the units, and then that's it. And you can't discriminate on income levels or immigration, or which I don't. I mean, obviously, I asked to see if somebody could afford the rent. That's a logical thing. My rule always when I rent is whatever the rent is. If hypothetically it's $1,000, I multiply it by three. If it's 800, I multiply by three. It's 2,400, and I have to see that you can make that much income, because usually a third of your life is to rent or payments. I don't think that you can manage it, and not maybe there is some people, but just my experience, that's what it is. And for them, you can't no longer do that. You have to just take it at face value. So these restrictions come in place, and the government gets more involved in this section. And I don't like that. I think that, when I said this is the kind of stuff that starts a civil war, I mean, the reason why, my parents, left, their homeland and raised me here. I was born and raised here, is because for a better life. It was for a better opportunity. That's why I love this. I love this country. I have some of my best friends that serve, uh, in the military, and I have a great appreciation. I've contributed to society in my own way, and it's like, we left because we felt like we had a chance here. We felt like, we walked away from everything. My parents didn't want to come here, man. They didn't want to go through the discrimination that they went through and the hardship they went through, and they didn't want to make the sacrifices, but they did it. They worked extremely freaking hard and to have what we have. And I'm not saying I'm like, loaded or anything, but I want to still have the chance to continue to grow that. And I feel like anytime that you have government regulations that step in, they hinder people like me and you, people that are viewing this channel, some people that want to make something of themselves. Not saying that just because you have a job, you can't make something of yourself, but make something more, like challenge yourself, build something for your family. I don't think that's wrong. And of course, guys, there's always good apples and bad apples, right? Cops, lawyers, judges, whatever, landlords too. They called slumlords, people that won't fix the roof or fix the plumbing, that might say, screw that, let the tenant pay it. That's wrong. We should put regulations in place to stop stuff like that from happening. But do I think that we should have more government involved in what we say and how we conduct business? I think the rental market has been just fine. I've never heard people complain. And if you say, yeah, well, the rents are too high in San Francisco or New York or whatever, well, those are desirable areas. I mean, you have people that are making more money, and therefore, if they're making more money, they're paying rents more. To fix those units, it costs more. That's why it's more expensive to live there than it is like in the Central Valley where I'm from, or like in the Midwest. It's cheaper to live there because labor and everything is cheap and everything around you is cheap. So that's why. And I mean, it makes logical sense. So to sum this up, it's basically they want to have complete control over housing. And when I mean they, like I'm not. It's hard not to point fingers, but it is the left. They want to have, control over, what they say. And I don't think they're coming from a bad place. I don't think they're like these evil people that want to destroy, the world or whatever. But I do think, it is in a sense a consolidation of power. All right. So I'm thinking bigger picture here. It's like, this is not, and this thing probably won't pass, if Trump's in office, especially because he's in real estate. But I think that this is like an ongoing like debate and an ongoing like war, and they're starting their first battle towards this. And so it's like first they're going to come after the landlords and say, like you need to, abide by these rules and these guidelines. And I just think that, like I said, this is why civil wars kind of start. It's because it's like you're coming to me and telling me what I can and can't do in my personal life and my property, because it's like I purchased that home, fair and square. I didn't kill somebody for it. I didn't, do anything illegal. I saved money and I, worked and my family worked and we purchased it. It's ours. And it's kind of like you're going to come and just bully us and just take it from us. And you're going to say that you're going to set up a fund that if I'm going to sell it, I have to find a qualified seller or the government's going to be able to buy it. Well, they're never going to give you like a fair price for it. So, I'm sorry if I'm expressing this and this might be, pissing someone off, but it's like, dude, like, how can you come and just take something from somebody just because you don't like the way that they're doing things? There are so many different ways that we could attack the housing problem. So many different ways. If they would just to lower, if they would put federal guidelines on and say, hey, we're going to make it cheaper to build homes, you know, you would see prices of homes go down and you would see prices of rents go down. Like right now in the Central Valley alone, it costs like close to $125 a square foot to build. And more than $50+ of that is city fees and government regulation fees. If you'd to waive those or cut those down, you would see a lot of investors saying, wow, we would love to build more units because there is a demand and a shortage of those for those units. And then you would see naturally rent prices go down. As supply of something goes up, demand, it would come to that equilibrium. You know what I mean? Like if the demand is this high and you bring the supply there, it'd come to that equilibrium price. And if you're not going to allow us to build, then of course, or you're going to make it very, very expensive to build it, and it's not profitable, then of course capital won't be attracted to that. So like I said, like I'm for it. I don't want to see people homeless or out in the streets. That's horrible. Nobody wants that. But I think there's different ways that we could build legislation, left and right, whatever, together to say, okay, how do we attack the housing problem? Because this is a community problem. No one wants to see a family in the streets. No one wants to see people homeless. So I think there's different ways that we could go about this, but I think doing it this way, and if they continue to attack this way, it's not right. It's not fair in that sense. I mean, and it's not fair. Like, I'm not some, billionaire that's sitting back counting all my money. Like it's not easy being a landlord in the sense like you always have to deal with things breaking, people moving out. You have to bring it up to a certain standard of living. You have to reinvest because if at the end of the day, if my unit is complete trash, no one's going to pay me $1,000 a month. They're going to be like, yo, I'll pay you $300 because we got to stay here for a month until we figure out where we're going to go, right? So there is a lot of upkeep and capital that's there. And I think there's certain things that government should just leave alone unless they're absolutely broken. But I think a lot of the reason why they're broken is because government was overly involved in the first place, like creating, of course, you got to have inspections. You can't just let somebody just put up 2x4s and build, you know what I mean? But you could waive a lot of the impact fees or a certain percentage of the impact fees or defer those fees down the road. There's a lot of other ways that we could go to help with the housing crisis in general. And the crisis right now, this is not the right way to do things, where in backhand, what you're really doing is trying to take control of all the rental properties in the United States. If you really care about people and you don't want to see them like, whatever, then you could always print more money, or you could just issue a stop, like kind of like what Italy did, and say, hey, for the next 60 days, we're going to stop payments. And if you're a mortgage company or you're a landlord, you know what I mean? You could fill out an application and apply to the Treasury of the United States, and they'll reimburse you. And you got to show lease proof that your rental units were approved, or you got to show proof that, this was rented. So the renters, they don't pay. And if you live in a home, you don't pay. But like JP Morgan or whoever owns your mortgage, or someone like me, whoever owns, the land, could just apply and they could get that money for those 60 days or 90 days or 120 days or whatever it is. That is a lot more efficient than trying to take control over property in the United States. Government should never be involved in your life this much. And the more power that we give them, it's kind of scary. So now some person is going to have complete control over who can or who can't sell property, who can or who can't live in a certain area. Either way, there's going to be, there's certain things that people should entrust for us to be able to do. We're not incompetent. We're, pretty smart people. We could figure it out for ourselves. It did fire me up a lot because I don't think government should have control over our lives this much, but I do want to, I'm not an evil person. I mean, I understand people need help, but like I said, I think there's different ways to go about it. But some of these provisions in this act are very, very dangerous. And it's the reason why people, get heated, So I hope this kind of helped a little bit break down what it is. If I need to talk more about it, I will. Hey, share this video with somebody and help me grow the page. And like I said, I hope it was informative.